A large majority of the data given in the CAP697 refers to distances measured in nautical air miles. When planning a flight on a chart, we measure distances in nautical ground miles. We shall look at the relationship between nautical air miles and nautical ground miles. Distance equals speed times time. Therefore, true airspeed times time equals distance in nautical air miles, whereas ground speed times time equals distance in nautical ground miles. Consider 3 aircraft, A, B and C, all travelling at 100 knots true airspeed. Aircraft A is in still air, and so the true airspeed equals the ground speed. It will travel 100 nautical air miles and 100 nautical ground miles in 1 hour. Aircraft B has a 20-knot headwind, and so the ground speed is 80 knots. It will travel 80 nautical ground miles, but at a true airspeed of 100 knots, it will travel 100 nautical air miles. Aircraft C, however, has a tailwind of 20 knots, and so will travel 120 nautical ground miles, whilst covering 100 nautical air miles. We can now establish a formula for converting between nautical air miles and ground miles, and vice versa. We assumed that all 3 aircraft travelled for 1 hour at the same true airspeed. If time equals distance divided by speed, then for aircraft A, time equals distance in nautical air miles divided by true airspeed, and for aircraft B and C, time equals distance in nautical ground miles divided by ground speed. Since time was the same for all 3 aircraft, we can now establish a mathematical formula which should be memorized. The reason that fuel planning data in the CAP697 uses nautical air miles is so that only one set of data is required for a given true airspeed. The alternative will be a separate set of data for every wind component. A page from the CAP697 illustrates the point. The cruise distances shown can be converted to nautical ground miles by use of the formula for any given wind component. Even in a climb or descent, where conditions change with change of height, the nautical ground miles can still be deduced. In the example, descending from 37,000 feet with a landing weight of 35,000 kilograms, the time taken is 23 minutes, and the air distance is 98 nautical air miles. Using the formula shown on screen, we can input the values we have extracted from the table. The nautical air miles are 98. The time in minutes is 23. And lastly, for the wind component, we will assume a headwind of 30 knots. You can see that the correction to make to the nautical air miles to get the nautical ground miles is 11.5. But do we add or subtract? Remember that in the example we had a headwind, and headwinds reduce the ground distance. Therefore, the ground distance will be less than the air distance. This means that in our example, we have calculated the nautical ground miles to be 86.5. This completes the lesson on the nautical air mile and nautical ground mile relationship, and you should now have the tools available to convert between the two.